The ideas in our paper are a number of different ideas for risk sharing. Our goal was plan design, but we found out that lots of different things wove together. So we thought about defining the risks and the methods of risk sharing, and then moved to different types of plans and principles. And we've tried to think about this broad perspective of lots of stakeholders. We hope we're going to persuade you all to study the paper because there's a lot in there. Builds on research, which Andy's going to share with you, and we're going to give you some case studies. We're focusing on, as we do this, 3 ideas that we think keep emerging: sustainability, self-adjusting systems, and multiple entity arrangements. And we're going to close with some ideas for the future of legislation. So, Andy?
Yeah, thanks. So in our research, we looked at, there's plenty to look at, but we chose to focus on 3 different projects, basically, that are out there. First, the one in the middle, Retirement 2020, was a project that actually has been done by the Society of Actuaries. And that was an initiative, really, of looking at how we would design retirement plans starting from a clean slate and looking at principles and things like that. And so coming out of that, just 3 principles that we're highlighting: the whole idea of alignment, aligning skills with interests in terms of the different stakeholders in the retirement system, whether participants, employers, plan sponsors, society at large, and so on, and trying to figure out that the different stakeholders doing things that make sense with respect to their interests and their skills. Self-adjusting systems is another area that Anna already mentioned, and we'll come back to that. And then just risk-sharing designs. How can we, as opposed to having this spectrum of either DB or DC on opposite ends, how can we get somewhere in the middle in terms of risk-sharing? That work has led then to this Retirement for the Ages work, which is a project sponsored by the American Academy of Actuaries, a sister organization of ours. And some of you may have been in Washington, D.C. on Monday of this week for a symposium they hosted on the same topic. They built these ages around 4 principles: alignment, again, you'll see a similar theme; governance, efficiency, and sustainability. And then the Melbourne-Mercer Index is something that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. And in their rating country systems, and some of the key themes that come out of their work are just looking at changing retirement ages, working longer, we talked about that in the last session, and providing for lifetime income. And all these things sort of work together in terms of principles for better design. Okay, before we talk about risk sharing, we wanted to identify risks. And so in Table 2 in our paper, we just have a list of risks and that we've shown here on the screen. A number of these are the common ones you'd think about: investment, interest rate, inflation, longevity, and so on. But then there's some of the ideas that maybe we don't think about so much in retirement risks, things like poor choices, particularly in the DC world. But poor choices have impact not only perhaps on employees, participants, but also on the plan sponsor context. And in fact, there was the comment in the last session that in a DC world, there is no norm for retirement. No sort of signal that's out there. So the fact that there are poor choices that can really impact risk in retirement design. And we define the rest of these risks in the paper.
As we were doing this work, one of the things that really came to me is, there are a little different way of looking at it, is that there are a number of different methods of sharing risk, and that you can't really separate them in the sense that they weave together and they're used in combination. This is a condensation of Table 3, and I don't think we've seen this quite in this form before, so I encourage you all to focus on Table 3. Plan design, which is the core of our paper, that defines benefits and the obligations of the parties. But financial structure defines who pays for the benefits and how the cost is shared. And if we have a plan that shares the contributions 50-50, you might say that's plan design and financial structure, and that shares the risk. If you have the contributions shared that the employees pay a fixed amount, that risk goes over to the participant. So those 2 things weave together. Self-adjusting systems adjust benefits and or contributions based on some circumstance, so that there's something that happens, there's a condition that causes you to adjust one or the other, but maybe both. So that connects to both. Risk pooling shares risk over participant groups, and it can be, and that links to financial structure as well as design. Multiple entity arrangements, single plans for a pool of different employers, those are really important, particularly when we remember that small employers are out there. And third-party guarantees, that changes, of course, the financial arrangements and the way participants use it, and they include insurance, but not necessarily only insurance. And then we add to this backup guarantee funds, such as the PBGC for pensions and the FDIC for bank deposits. Now, we also look at a range of methods, risk by risk, for sharing risks, and these is excerpt from Table 5 in the paper. I'm just going to focus on longevity risk right now as one that's particularly important. And we see, if we look at this from the plan sponsor's lens, they have a lot of things they can do when thinking about longevity risk. Move to a defined contribution plan, pay out lump sums, that gets rid of it. Index retirement ages, that basically builds it back into the plan design. Adjust benefits for longer life, that builds it back into the plan design. Choose assumptions for a defined benefit plan valuation that build in enough mortality improvement. That gets it into the funding. Use financial instruments to manage the risk, and again, you could use them in combination. If I go and look at it from the participant's point of view, and we feel it's really important to look at it from both sides, I can use a lifetime income payout. I can spend only investment income, and focus groups that we did recently say a lot of people want to do that. I can select a withdrawal rate that's hoped to be safe, and that only partially manages the risk, but it does some. Retire later, which gets to the same as the employer side, or set a long planning horizon. So this is a very complex subject with lots of moving parts. One of the things we thought we would point out to you is that we think that there are, in these discussions, ideas that are often overlooked. And one of them is what are the risks, and Andy mentioned some of these, but things like solvency risk, fiduciary risk, risk of poor decisions. People often have these discussions about risk, but they don't think about some of those. Also, when we talk about non-contributory DB plans, we think, oh, all the risk is with the plan sponsor. Not so. The participant normally would have, if it's not an index benefit, post-retirement inflation risk. There's also a big risk that the plan will be modified or terminated depending on the environment, and if they can do that. Certainly, that's a private sector in the U.S. all the time. And early employment termination in final average pay plans. Likewise, when you get to the defined contribution plans, none of the risk is on the plan sponsor. Not so. They have fiduciary risk. They also have an issue talked about in the first panel a little bit. If employees are unable to afford to retire, that creates some business risk for the participants. And a lot of these conversations may not think about small employers, so that's another issue to think about.
Okay, so in our paper then we focused on two specific case studies, and we won't have a lot of time to go into those in much detail, but the one I'll spend a little more time on, this one of New Brunswick, because I particularly as an actuary find it rather interesting. And basically, in some sense, New Brunswick was on a cliff as it related to their demographics of their population and things like that, and just some real challenges they had to make. And they came together in a sort of labor, government, management coalition to develop a framework for what they're calling shared risk pension plans. They have a number of principles that we talk about. We list 4 or 5 of them right here. A lot around robust risk management, looking for benefit security and sustainability. Plans must be affordable and equitable, and so on. And in doing so, they came up with this framework for basically a 2-tiered approach. Base benefits that are based on basically a very simple career average plan payable at normal retirement age. And then everything else is basically thrown into ancillary benefits. So ancillary benefits might be your early retirement provisions, your cost of living adjustments, a career average update to your formula, and so on. And what they do is they have a very robust risk management structure around this, where they're basically saying, for those base benefits, they're funding these plans, setting up the funding mechanism so that they have a 97.5% likelihood of paying those benefits over a 20-year simulation period. So very strong funding, very conservative funding base. And then for the ancillary benefits, it's more like a 75% likelihood of payment. And each plan then has to have a whole set of rules around what happens if they get either in a deficit, and so how they share the cutting of benefits on particularly the ancillary benefits initially, and then also a surplus plan. So if they get into surplus position, where do they restore benefits? How does that happen? And so it's a relatively new, recent innovation in New Brunswick, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over time. But initially, there's very positive results, both labor and management contributing on that.
And people have adopted this, so it's not in the planning stage, it's in the reality stage for several plans.
Right, absolutely. A second case study we looked at was a DC example. This is actually a specific plan being marketed by Buck Consultants, but the key points of this were just that it's taking the lessons of behavioral finance, self-adjusting features, a modeling tool that's built in that automatically makes adjustments to contribution rates, payout rates for managing payout rates for employees and so on to try and get better outcomes for employees if they're not sort of engaged in the retirement planning process specifically.
Okay, so we want to share with you some of our ideas for what should the future regulatory structure do, because in order to do most of these things, we need to align stakeholder interests, critical issue, require a sustainable financial model and effective governance, permit multiple design options. We think that it's important to still be able to do DB, DC, and hybrids, provide plan sponsors with the tools that they need for risk sharing and pooling, and allow them to modify from traditional designs. We support encouraging self-adjusting systems, later retirement, critical issue. I think you'll hear a lot about that. Encourage pooling of longevity risk and appropriate management, and provide good mechanisms for small employers to band together. Thank you.